You'll starve out here before the winter's through, and you know it. That's what my brother said the morning I told him I was marrying a stranger from a letter. And I remember the way his voice cracked on the word starve, like he already knew he couldn't stop me, only warn me. I packed my mother's wedding dress into a trunk that same afternoon, folded so careful you'd think it was made of glass instead of ivory silk. And I didn't tell him the real reason I was going. I wasn't running toward a husband. I was running from a town that had already decided what kind of woman I was, and I didn't have the strength left to argue with them anymore. My name is Eliza Kane, and I was 26 years old when I boarded a train out of Springfield, Missouri, with nothing but that trunk, $40 sewn into my hem, and a letter from a rancher named Thomas Whitlock, who lived outside a dusty crossroads town in the Wyoming territory called Larkspur. He'd placed an advertisement, plain as anything, saying he needed a wife who could keep a house and wasn't afraid of hard weather. I answered it because I was tired. Tired of the whispers about the school teacher who'd broken our engagement in front of half the church. Tired of being the woman men pointed at and pitied. Tired of being nobody's choice. I thought maybe out west, nobody would know my name well enough to ruin it. Thomas met me at the depot with his hat in his hands and dust on his boots, and he didn't smile. Not right away. He just looked at me the way a man looks at a fence post he'd willed. It's not sure is sturdy enough to hold the weight he needs it to hold. You're smaller than I pictured, he said, which wasn't unkind, just honest. And I would come to learn that honesty was the only language Thomas Whitlock spoke fluently. I've been told I'm sturdier than I look, I answered, and he almost smiled then. Almost. The ride to his ranch took near 2 hours by wagon, past wheat fields gone gold and brittle in the September heat, and neither of us said much. I watched his hands on the reins, rough and sun-cracked, and I thought about how a woman commits her whole life to a man, based on nothing but ink on paper and the shape of his shoulders in a wagon seat. It should have frightened me more than it did. Maybe I'd already used up all my fear back in Missouri. His house was small but solid, log and stone, with a porch that sagged only a little on the left side. There was no woman's touch anywhere in it. No curtains, no flowers pressed in books, nothing soft. I understood before he even said it that his first wife had died, and that he hadn't let anyone fill the space she left. Her name was Margaret. He told me that first night, standing in the doorway like he couldn't decide whether to come in or stay out. 3 years, this December. Fever took her quick. I don't talk about her much, and I'd be obliged if you didn't ask. I won't ask, I said, though I wondered, plenty, in the months that followed. We married 2 days later, in front of the Justice of the Peace in Larkspur, a ceremony so quick and quiet you could have missed it blinking. I wore my traveling dress, not my mother's gown, that stayed folded in the trunk, wrapped in paper, because some part of me knew this wasn't the wedding it was meant for. My mother had worn it to marry a man she loved so fierce, the whole county talked about it for years. After, I didn't feel fierce marrying Thomas. I felt like two people signing a contract to survive the same winter together. The first months were work, plain and endless. I learned to bake bread in his temperamental stove, learned which hens laid where, learned the particular silence that settled over him some evenings when the wind picked up just so. The same wind, I guessed, that had been blowing the night Margaret died. He wasn't cruel. He was careful. Careful with his words, careful with his hands, careful never to let me see too far past the wall he'd built around himself. And I understood that carefulness, because I had my own walls, built out of a broken engagement and a town full of pitying eyes. It was Sarah Boone from the next ranch over who first told me about Margaret's dress. She never got to wear it, Sarah said one afternoon, helping me hang wash on the line, her voice dropping like she was handling something breakable. Margaret's wedding dress. Her mother sent the fabric all the way from Ohio, and Margaret sewed on it every evening for near 2 months. Then the fever came before it was even finished. Thomas kept it. Never could bring himself to burn it or give it away. It's up in that trunk in the loft, if you're curious. I told her I wasn't curious. That was a lie. I found it 3 weeks later, on a day Thomas had gone to Cheyenne to sell cattle and wouldn't be back till dark. I don't know what pulled me up that ladder into the loft. Maybe just a woman's need to understand the ghost she was living beside. The trunk wasn't locked. Inside, wrapped in muslin, was the dress. Pale blue, half-finished, the hem still pinned where Margaret's needle had stopped forever. It was beautiful in the aching way. Unfinished things are beautiful, full of everything that should have happened and didn't. I was still holding it when I heard the wagon return early, and I hadn't the sense to climb down fast enough. Thomas found me standing in the loft with his dead wife's dress in my hands, and something in his face closed like a door slamming. "Put that back," he said, low and rough. "That ain't yours to touch." I wasn't trying to. I said, "Put it back, Eliza." His voice cracked on my name. The first time he'd said it like that, like it cost him something. "You don't know what that dress cost me. You don't know anything." "Then tell me," I said, climbing down, standing in front of him with the muslin still crushed in my fists. "Tell me something, Thomas. Because I've been living in this house 3 months like a ghost myself, tiptoeing around a woman I never met, and I'm tired. I'm so tired of being careful." He looked at me a long moment, jaw working, and then he said the thing that finally cracked him open. "I never even told her I loved her. Not once, not out loud. I thought there'd be time. I thought there was always going to be more time." His voice broke clean in half on that last word. "And now I've got a wife standing in front of me, and I don't know how to say it to her either, because saying it feels like betraying a dead woman who never got to hear it." I didn't know what to say to that, not right away. I just set the dress down, careful, on the trunk lid, and I said the only true thing I had. "I'm not asking you to love me the way you loved her. I know that's not mine to ask for, but I'd like to stop being a stranger in my own house, Thomas. That's all. That's all I'm asking." He nodded, once, and walked out to the barn, and we didn't speak of it again for a long while. But something had shifted, thin as a crack in ice, and I felt it under my feet every day after. Winter came hard that year, harder than my brother had even warned me about. The snow piled against the fences till the cattle huddled close, and still lost weight we couldn't afford to lose. Thomas worked from dark to dark, coming in with frost in his eyelashes, and a silence so heavy, started talking just to fill the house with something besides wind. I told him about Missouri, about the school teacher who'd brum, left me standing at the altar rail in front of the whole congregation, about how a woman's shame follows her louder than any drum. I hadn't meant to tell him that much. It just came out, one cold night, over stew gone lukewarm because neither of us wanted to stop talking long enough to eat. "He left you standing there?" Thomas asked, and there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not pity, something closer to anger on my behalf. "In front of everybody," I said. "My own mother's dress on my back, and he just didn't come. Sent his brother round after, with a note. Said he'd found someone he loved more." "That's a coward's cruelty," Thomas said. "A man does that, he ought to be ashamed the rest of his days." "I used to think it was me," I admitted. "That there was something in me not worth staying for." Thomas set down his spoon. "There ain't nothing wrong with you, Eliza. You hear me? Nothing." And it was the plainest, truest thing anyone had said to me in years, and I had to look away from him so he wouldn't see what it did to my eyes. That was the turning point, though I didn't know it yet. Not some grand gesture, just a man setting down his spoon and telling a woman she wasn't broken. Something eased between us after that, slow as thaw. He started leaving the porch light burning when he came in late, so I wouldn't wake in the dark wondering where he was. I started mending his shirts before he even asked. The way a wife does for a husband, she stopped merely tolerating and started tending. We were becoming something neither of us had named yet, and I think we were both afraid to name it, but afraid that speaking it aloud would spook it like a wild colt not yet gentled to the rope. Then came the fire. It started in the hay barn on a night in late February, a lantern knocked loose by a startled mare, and by the time Thomas smelled the smoke, it had already climbed to the loft. He shouted for me to stay back, but I didn't listen. I never was good at staying back from things that mattered, and together, we hauled water and beat at flames with wet blankets, while the horses screamed behind the doors we hadn't yet reached. Thomas went in after them anyway, into smoke thick as a wall, and I stood outside screaming his name till my voice tore, certain I was about to lose him the same sudden, senseless way Margaret had been taken, certain the universe had some cruel pattern it meant to repeat on this house no matter who lived in it. He came out coughing, black with soot, leading 2 terrified horses, and the barn's north corner collapsed in a roar of sparks, not 30 seconds after he cleared the door. We lost the barn. We lost feed we couldn't replace till spring, and for a while it looked like we might lose the herd besides, thin as they already were from the hard winter. It was, by any measure, a ruin. Neighbors said it plain. Sarah Boone said it gentlest, but even she said it, that a ranch this deep in debt from one bad winter and one worse fire might not see another summer standing. I found Thomas that night sitting in the ashes of what used to be the barn door, staring at nothing, and I sat down beside him in the cold and the char without a word, because some silences you don't fill with talk. You just sit inside them with a person so they know they're not alone in the wreckage. "I can't lose another thing," he finally said, voice scraped raw from smoke and something worse than smoke. "I can't do it again, Eliza. I don't have it in me." "You haven't lost me," I said. "Whatever else burns down around us, you haven't lost me, Thomas Whitlock, and I need you to hear that plain, the way you told me nothing was wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you either, and I ain't going anywhere." He turned and looked at me then, ash on his face, firelight long gone, but something else lit behind his eyes instead, and he said, "I love you. I should have said it weeks ago. I love you, and I think I have for a while now, and I was too much a coward to say it, because saying it felt like closing a door I wasn't formed and ready to close." "You don't have to close any doors," I told him, my own voice breaking now. "Loving me doesn't erase loving her. I'm not asking you to choose." We spent that spring rebuilding. The barn first, board by board, neighbors coming to help the way frontier neighbors do, because everyone out there had lost something to weather or fire or grief, and knew the debt of kindness owed and repaid in turn. Sarah Boone brought pies. Her husband and 2 other ranchers brought lumber and their own 2 hands. Thomas worked till his knuckles split, and I worked beside him hauling nails and holding boards. Steady. And somewhere in that rebuilding we stopped being 2 strangers surviving a contract and became something that looked, from any distance, exactly like a marriage. It was in June, wheat coming up green and full across the fields. Thomas asked me to come up to the loft with him. The new loft, rebuilt clean and smelling of fresh-cut pine. He'd carried something up there ahead of me, and when I climbed the ladder I found the old trunk, Margaret's trunk, sitting open, and beside it, folded with more care than I'd ever seen him give anything, was my mother's ivory wedding dress. I hadn't even known he'd found it in my own trunk. "I want to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to know you can say no, and nothing between us changes if you do." He took a breath, like a man stepping off a ledge. "Will you stand up with me again? Proper this time. In front of the church, in front of Sarah and the neighbors who rebuilt that barn with us. I want to marry you the way a man marries a woman he loves, not the way 2 strangers sign a paper to get through a winter." I looked at the dress, my mother's dress, the one that never made it to my first wedding, because some part of me had known that wedding wasn't to wed us, the one it belonged to. "This dress," I said, my voice thick. "My mother wore it to marry a man she loved so much. The whole county still talks about it. I never wore it because I never felt that kind of love standing at any altar. Not till now." "Then wear it now," Thomas said. "Wear it for me." We were married again that August, under the cottonwoods behind the little church in Larkspur, with Sarah Boone crying louder than anyone had a right to, and half the county turning out because word travels fast in small towns. Good word same as bad. I wore my mother's dress, the ivory silk catching the afternoon light, and when I walked toward Thomas standing there in his good coat, with his hat finally off his head, I watched his face do something I'd never seen it do before. Soften all the way open, no walls left standing at all. "Beautiful," he whispered when I reached him, so quiet only I could hear it. "It was made for my wedding. To you." I married a stranger to escape a town that had decided who I was before I ever got the chance to. Decide it myself, and what I found instead, out past the wheat fields and the hard winters, was a man who looked at my broken places and never once flinched, who set down his spoon one ordinary night and told me there was nothing wrong with me, who walked into a burning barn and came out still choosing me on the other side of the smoke. Some wounds don't heal because time passes over them. They heal because somebody finally stays long enough to prove they're not going anywhere, and stands there in the ashes and the wheat gold light, and calls you beautiful, and means it for good.